Okay, the Warriors' best win of the season. Easily. Well, you can make the argument that the best win of the season was against the Clippers, but this one is right up there, considering they didn't have Draymond Green. The Warriors had just suffered a terrible loss against the Blazers at home. The Jazz have a lot of talent, a lot of size, and are not easy to deal with. So this was definitely a test for the Warriors. Would they have to play another game down to the wire at home without Draymond, or even possibly lose to the Jazz? Luckily for us and the Warriors, this turned out to be one of the easiest wins of the season, despite the fact that the Warriors got out to a horrendous start, letting the Jazz get whatever they want. They were absolutely unstoppable in that first quarter, and the Warriors allowed 35 points in that first quarter. But then the script flipped, and the Warriors completely took control in the second and the third quarter. And for me, the biggest story of this game is Quinten Post in the starting lineup and how great he looks as their main anchor. I think I can safely say that Quinten Post is the Warriors' best possession-by-possession defender at the center spot over anybody else, including Draymond Green. I think Draymond no longer has the rebounding ability to consistently play that center role for this team, and he has nowhere near the rim-deterring ability, the paint protection that a guy like Quinten Post can provide. So in this video, we're going to take a ton of look at film to see a lot of the great things that Post was doing defensively for this team that opened this game up for the Warriors on offense in transition, and how never going to a ridiculous tiny lineup at any point, even though they ran 4-guard lineups, there were no lineups where Draymond is at center and there's 3 guards on the floor and the Warriors are just looking hopeless out there. The starting lineup had Quinten Post in it. And like I said, we'll go through all the nuances. And if that sounds good to you, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. Let's get straight to it. So that first quarter, man, I would rather not remember this, but facts are facts. This is what happened. The Jazz got out to an 11-0 start on the Warriors in the first 3 minutes of the game. And obviously Steve Kerr, after losing to the Blazers, talked about maybe going back to Quinten Post in the starting lineup to go bigger because they're having size problems. No kidding. So back to the bench, Will Richard went, and unfortunately, the guy Steve Kerr decided to put into the game at power forward, GP2. Officially, it was Steph Curry, Moses Moody, Jimmy Butler, GP2, and Quinten Post. Meanwhile, the Jazz have 2 7-footers out there, Lauri Markkanen and Yusuf Nurkic. Luckily for the Warriors, they have Jimmy Butler, who said, screw it, enough of the motion offense. Give me the ball, dump the ball down to me. I'm going to get going. I'm going to score. And that's what happened as Jimmy Butler went on his own scoring run, bucket after bucket after bucket inside the paint. And then the Warriors managed to go on their own 9-2 run, making the score 13-9 after the first 5 minutes of the first quarter. And Curry got off to a slow start. I think he shot like 0 for 3 to start things off. But when Curry doesn't have it going, he makes plays like this. He's setting a screen for GP2. In case you wonder sometimes how a Warriors player ends up being wide open at the basket, well, this is what happens. Steph Curry sets a screen. Most of the time, his defender and the defender of the teammate that he's screening for both end up staying with Steph Curry, leaving the guy cutting to the basket wide open. And this is another one of those plays where Steph Curry makes a powerful play, gets no statistical credit, making a teammate better. And then we saw Trayce Jackson-Davis get into the rotation. With Draymond out, with Al Horford out, the Warriors have no choice but to go to both Quinten Post and Trayce Jackson-Davis. Again, for me personally, I would love to see more of the combinations of Quinten Post and Trayce Jackson-Davis on the floor at the same time. Quinten Post is a 7-footer. TJD is 6'9", 6'10". He's a natural power forward who's been masquerading as a center for the Warriors. So being able to see him as a power forward and the Warriors having a lot of size and this inside-out tandem of TJD and Post is something that could work really well for this team. But having said that, for tonight, only Post and TJD were available at the center spot, so I suppose it makes sense that they had to be completely staggered. And the second unit lineup looked half decent, with Trayce at center, Guy Santos at power forward, Jimmy Butler at small forward, where I think he should be for a majority of games. He should be a shooting guard or small forward so that he regularly has a size advantage against whoever he's playing against, and he doesn't have a size advantage at all when he's at power forward. Unfortunately for Trayce, he continues to be surrounded by players who for some reason cannot find him for lobs. Guy Santos was very guilty of that in this game. In that first quarter, there's a lob right there for Trayce who is wide open, but he throws up a floater on a 2-on-1 situation and breaks it. There's another possession late in the fourth quarter where Trayce is literally wide open underneath the basket, throw him the ball and he will dunk it. But no, Santos for some reason sees him way too late, throws him some whack pass that gets intercepted. And unfortunately, Santos has yet to show the impact that he's shown last season. I just don't think that he's had enough of an opportunity. And I do think based on what we saw from Santos last season, he is a Curry specific player. He needs to play next to Steph Curry. That gravity opens the door for Santos to do his thing when he's hustling, grabbing those offensive rebounds and getting second chance opportunities for Steph Curry. That's the kind of impact player that Curry needs to have next to him. GP2 is probably also one of those players where he is a Steph Curry specific player, which is why GP2 and Santos in particular played together next to Steph Curry last season. And that made a lot more sense for those units defensively because you have Guy Santos the hustler with size, 6'8", goes after loose balls, rebounds, offensive rebound, defensive rebound, all of that stuff, GP2, POA. The key to make things great for Steph Curry minutes is to make sure that you have Steph-centric players, guys who play for Steph Curry, set screens for him, looks for him regularly, hustles, make sure that the defense around him is good, all these things. And well, when you don't have that, and you have a bunch of guards on the floor next to Steph Curry, with only one big rather than two, that's not necessarily protecting a Steph Curry lineup. You're making that lineup vulnerable by making them too small, and ensuring that they don't have enough size on the floor to make consistent two-way impact. Having said that, later in that first quarter, there was a really bad defensive possession where both Potts and Buddy Hield essentially got lost and left Quinten George wide open from the wing, and he knocks down the three-point shot, and Steve Kerr sees that and is irate. He calls the timeout and he starts yelling at that unit, and honestly, you could see it. Potts is just out there kind of dancing around in no man's land. Now, when you see that that mistake is being made, Buddy Hield, who was the closest to George at the time, has got to communicate with Potts to get up to his man so that he can go over to Quinten George and cover him. And that didn't happen either. And then a crazy thing happened in the second quarter. Potts did not play at all. For the first time, Steve Kerr punished Potts because he didn't like that play. So ultimately, the first quarter ended up being 35-26 in favor of the Jazz. The Jazz are shooting like 70% from the field. It is absolutely ridiculous. They are getting whatever they want, and it is looking troublesome. And then the second quarter comes, and the game completely flips in favor of the Warriors. The unit was Pat Spencer, Will Richard, Moses Moody, Jimmy Butler, and Quinten Post. This is a guard-ish lineup. Moses Moody, as you know, I'm going to see him mostly as shooting guard, but he's at small forward here. And then you have Jimmy Butler at power forward. Jimmy Butler, like I said, generally speaking, it's best that Butler is at shooting guard or small forward as well. But of course, in this game, with no Draymond available, you got to make an exception. This is the unit. This is the lineup. And they went on a giant run. And now we're about to go through some film to see how the Warriors were able to go on a massive run. Initially, the Warriors were able to go on an 11-0 run, and they ballooned that all the way to an 18-0 run. Think about that for a second. 18-0 run. That is complete and utter domination. And you can never go on a run like that without playing utterly great defense. And utterly great defense was available to the Warriors thanks to Quinten Post. Like here, Richard's man is able to blow by him and is trying to get to the rim, but Quinten Post slides over, is at the rim. And who is this? Mihailuk? This guy does some whack thing in the post. He loses the ball, and then the Warriors are out in transition. Next thing you know, Will Richard is wide open in transition, and he knocks down the open three. And this was a big one because to this point, the Warriors are 1 of 10 from the three-point line. Next time down, this time Post is guarding Lauri Markkanen. Lauri Markkanen takes a mid-range shot. Post is there for the contest, and he forces a miss. And now the Warriors are out in transition again, and this time Moses Moody is open, and boom, another three-point shot. And almost instantly, this goes from a 9-point deficit to a 3-point deficit. And here's another play where Quinten Post is forced to switch up against point guard Isaiah Collier, and he slides his feet so well, is able to completely stop him dead in his tracks. He's forced to go to his teammate Ace Bailey, who Moses Moody is able to shut down at the rim, and now the Warriors are out in transition. Once again, you can see here Quinten Post is sprinting to the corner so that he can make himself available on the offensive end. Because he sprinted to a spot, the ball goes to him and he takes a no-dip three-point shot, and boom goes the dynamite. Post was just everywhere on defense. everywhere. He is guarding anybody and everybody and containing them and keeping them in front of him no matter what. Here's yet another play where he's able to force Collier to be indecisive, and then he's able to grab the rebound over Nurkic, who's given the Warriors a lot of trouble over the years as a 7-footer. Quinten Post was ultimately a plus 20 in that first half. And the unit out there, despite being smallish, absolutely thrived because they were able to get stops thanks to Quinten Post inside the paint, and they were able to get out in transition and get a whole lot of easy buckets that way. It's amazing how much the Warriors can do on offense when they get stops consistently. It all starts with their ability to defend and protect that paint area, which is why I have been advocating for Quinten Post to be the starting center for this team pretty much for a chunk of this season. Here's another play. Yet again, Isaiah Collier looking to penetrate, but he sees a giant 7-footer in the paint again, and it completely deters him, and the play ends up resetting for the Jazz again. And now they're just not getting anything inside the paint whatsoever. Everything is coming from the outside. And when that happens, when you don't get easy points in the paint anymore, all of a sudden, those 3-point shots that they take feels a lot heavier. And you can see that here. Ace Bailey is wide open in the corner, but he's not able to hit it. And the Warriors are able to attack in transition again. There's a cross match. There's a mismatch. Isaiah Collier is now on Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler is able to get all the way down to the rim for the easy bucket. And man, part of the reason why I don't like some of these small lineups where Quinten Post is on an island and the biggest guy next to him is Jimmy Butler at 6'7" with his 6'8" wingspan. He has the same wingspan as 6'2" DeAnthony Melton. So you see here on this play, for example, Lauri Markkanen, who is a 7-footer, has a complete and utter mismatch against Will Richard. And this is not looking good. But look at Quinten Post, sees exactly what's going on. Will Richard needs help, slides his feet over. Lauri Markkanen thinks that he's about to get a good shot, but Quinten Post is right there putting a lot of pressure on this shot and forcing a miss. So you look at all these plays and you can see why the guy is plus 20 despite the fact that he ended up scoring in single digits in this game. And yet another impact play from Post. The Warriors are able to force a 3-point shot into a miss. Quinten Post is there to box out Nurkic once again, gets the rebound. The Warriors are out in transition again. And then on the other end of the floor, Pat Spencer and Quinten Post are running a pick and roll. Quinten Post gets the ball and sees that Moses Moody is wide open. So the ball goes to Moses Moody and he cans the shot for yet another converted 3-point shot for the Warriors. And let me just say about Moses Moody, he's been kind of all over the map over the last 3 games. After dropping 32 points on the Pelicans, the next 3 games that followed, Moses Moody was absolutely inconsistent and he did not show up offensively for this team. And that's frustrating. Moses Moody, his confidence still seems to come and go. Even in this game, there were times where he ended up being open and for no reason at all, the guy is just hesitating. No, if you're open, get the ball and launch it. Do it with confidence. Don't second guess yourself. If you have a good shot, take it without hesitation. There was one play in the first quarter where he's out in transition leaking. Steph Curry finds him perfectly. The defense does not get back in time, but Moody, right under the rim, decides to do a pump fake anyway and allow the defense to recover. These are the things that he cannot be doing for this team in his 5th year. But thank goodness he did play well to begin that second quarter where the Warriors made that giant run. And that is why you see the plus 20 next to his name for this game. And he did end up putting up 15 points despite it being pretty inefficient, 6 of 17 from the field. And it's so funny, I'm covering a Warriors game and it's not 10 plus minutes later that I am talking about Steph Curry. Steph Curry had 31 points in 29 minutes of play, 12 of 24 from the field. He was pretty pedestrian from the 3-point line, only shot 6 of 17, and yet he shot 50% from the field. Again, showing you just how good he is from inside of the arc, even if his 3-point shot is off. And these were the most casual 31 points you'll ever see from Steph Curry. This was so casual. It didn't really seem like he was doing much, but then you look up and then in that third quarter, the guy has 14 points on 5 of 7 shooting from the field. And it's just comical how easily and quickly he's able to rack up points for this team. The greatest point generator you have ever seen in your life. I doubt that you will ever see again a 37-year-old point guard putting up points as easily as Steph Curry has done this season. And yeah, unfortunately, once again, tonight, he's still stuck being in these 4-guard lineups, and it just seems like whenever Steph Curry is on the floor, there's always a lineup that is just sub-optimized and not good enough on defense. So that's why when you see the plus minus, you'll see that Steph Curry is only a +4 in this game. But you know what? He didn't have to play a bunch of basketball next to Draymond Green. There wasn't a whole bunch of traffic cop offense going on, and the Warriors offense looked that much better for it. You didn't have to see a bunch of lineups where Steph Curry's center is Draymond and there's 2 other guards next to him and he's in these broken small lineups. Even though, again, involved in a bunch of unnecessary 4-guard lineups, these things are going to continue to hurt the Warriors in closer games, even in the fourth quarter. But Steve Kerr should have sat Steph Curry because they had a 20-point lead. They just couldn't fully get away and turn it into like a 30-point game because Steve Kerr is throwing out a 4-guard lineup and just breathing unnecessary life into the Jazz when they are more than done at this point of the game. I'm going to give a quick shout out to Buddy Hield, who had the best game of the season. He scored 20 points in this game, a season high, in just 22 minutes of play. Hopefully he can have a few more of these games before the trade deadline comes so that he's not too much of a baggage in negotiations, because he still has to be traded off of this team once and for all. And again, maybe tonight's game will breathe some confidence into his game for the upcoming games. He had a really good game for the first time in a long time, and this probably gave him another 15-game rope from Steve Kerr. And let me quickly say about Jimmy Butler once again, he was awesome in that first quarter when the Warriors needed him and the team had absolutely nothing going. Jimmy Butler has a way of being able to stop the bleeding. And in these Jimmy Butler centric lineups, he is the primary facilitator. And as long as you have good defenders around him and guys that can shoot the ball, Butler is a guy who can completely stabilize these lineups that doesn't involve Steph Curry. So once again, he was ultra efficient in 29 minutes of play, 18 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, and a +19 for the game. He ended up hurting something in his hand later in the game. A finger, wrist, I'm not sure, but he was grabbing at it pretty notably. Let's just hope that is nothing serious, because they cannot afford to lose Jimmy Butler for any period of time, given that they are only 10-9 on the season. And a major shout out to Will Richard, who was not in the starting lineup in this game, but when you just ask him to fit in to what the Warriors need to do, he is a player who was perfect in his role, and he was awesome in that second quarter when they made that giant run. It wasn't Buddy Hield, it wasn't Potts, it was Will Richard who got things started off. And in the 22 minutes that he played, he ended up being a team leading +29. Huge. Don't put pressure on a rookie to be some incredible guy in a small ball lineup where the defense is broken and make him look bad in the process. Just give him minutes where you can, where the defense is relatively set at the very least. Let there at least be an anchor when he's out there on the floor, and he's capable of connecting your lineups the way he did in this game. Really impressive performance by the rookie. His feel for the game, it just cannot be taught. He just knows how to play. Shout out to Trayce Jackson-Davis as well. He had to also be a part of these 4-guard lineups. Very difficult to protect, but he did a pretty affordable job. Being a presence inside the paint, making it difficult, deterring and altering shots, making his presence felt if he's not out there, and if there's some guy masquerading as a center when he's not or shouldn't be a center, a game like this would not be complete for the Warriors. And I think even he might be better suited to be the center of smaller lineups than Draymond is at this point. I do not trust Draymond Green anymore in small lineups, especially if there are like 3 guards on the floor or 3 forwards, but one of the forwards is a little bit too small, like a Moses Moody. That's just not good enough anymore. And we didn't get any of those segments in this game, and interesting how the Warriors came away with one of the most dominant wins of this season with Draymond completely out of the equation. All these concepts where offensively you're running the offense through him and defensively you're running one of the tiniest lineups ever seen in the NBA. You take these giant headaches out of the equation and the Warriors look like a normal functioning team. Steve Kerr really has to consider changing things up on both ends of the floor when it comes to Draymond Green. A lot of the major issues that this team deals with, when you think about it, it all involves Draymond Green. And I'm really sick and tired of it. If you're Steve Kerr, you have to prioritize Quinten Post at the center spot moving forward way more than Draymond Green at the center spot. One more thing I'll mention about Trayce, he needs to find a way to get his confidence back up on the offensive end of the floor. He has to attack with more ferociousness. Here, for example, he receives a pass and he should just be going up to dunk this ball on somebody's head. Instead, he instantly kicks it out to Moses Moody. Look, it's a nice pass. Moody ultimately ended up missing this shot, but that's not the point. You're point blank at the rim. You have got to look to score the ball yourself and turn yourself into a threat around the basket. There's just not enough forceful energy from Trace. That energy that he had in his rookie year is long gone, dissipated. He needs to get that back if he wants to continue to play an important role for this team. Because right now, he's a little bit too one way. I understand that a lot of his teammates just don't find him enough, even when he's wide open. And I showed some examples of that in this video. But he's got to find a way to play through it all and just continue to be aggressive. There's too many times where there's a dunk available to him and he should be cramming it. But you'll see him like go up about to dunk and then he'll try to finesse it and become Kyrie Irving and do some weird up and under thing and end up missing a layup in the process of it. Of course, the lack of confidence when it comes to young players all comes down to poor coaching by Steve Kerr. But with Draymond not as an option in this game, Steve Kerr was forced to put a center on the floor at all times, and that worked out really well for this team against the Utah Jazz team that is pretty big. Anyway, it is a relief to see the Warriors come away with a very easy victory. They need more games like this moving forward, and the way to do that is with great defense. And the way to play great defense is to make sure that you have an anchor at the center spot and that you have enough size to play the type of defense that you want to play. Again, you play great defense, then you can get out on transition, and a lot of good things happen in transition when you're consistently able to get stops. Dominant teams go on dominant runs because they're able to get multiple stops. That's how you go on a 10-2 run, a 14-2 run, a 17-4 run, stuff like this. And that is where you create the margin for error. When you don't play good enough defense, when you're not able to rebound, and when you allow the other team to grab offensive rebounds, get putbacks, and get easy buckets around the paint area that they have no business getting, that's when the Warriors become an unserious team. Anyway, great win. Major shout out to Quinten Post once again, Jimmy Butler, Steph Curry, Will Richard, TJD, and yes, Buddy Hield. Hopefully they can continue this run. We'll see what happens in the following game. We'll see if Draymond is available. We'll see if Steve Kerr will go right back to a bunch of nonsense. But the next game is on Wednesday, and it's a big one against the Rockets. And you better believe going small against that team is going to be a very bad idea. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on Wednesday. Steph Curry is the GOAT.